All right, hey guys, good job on the speech stuff today. All right, let's look at freedom of religion. All right, so this is lecture 2 of Civil Rights, Civil Libs, pages 7 and 8, like way shorter, right, than last time. I know that was a big chunk, but that's okay. All right. So what I would say is make a cheat sheet again, right? One side, 3x5. All right, I'm only saying this in the video though. All right, okay. And again, you can do a piece of paper and cut it out, right? 3x5, you don't have to have a flashcard. Okay. So we have 2 clauses in the First Amendment regarding religion. We have the Establishment Clause and we have the Speech Clause, right? And again, you guys have this, right? You have the Bill of Rights. You may want to take a look at it. You got to be comfortable with this. So Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. There's the Establishment Clause. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And the thereof is a reference to the free exercise of religion. There's the Free Exercise Clause, all right? Real simple, all right? Exercise is practicing your religion. Exercising for your religion, right? Okay. And then the Establishment Clause, there's kind of this basic meaning. The government cannot establish an official religion, all right? But we still, and we're going to spend some time on Wednesday looking at this, like really, what does the Establishment Clause mean? And we'll look at some precedents to try to figure that out, okay? All right. So there's a couple, like when you look at your notes here, it says the accommodationist view, the separatist view, the endorsement view, the non-preferentialist view. Those are all ways the court has interpreted the Constitution. Those are all ways in which, like, the general legal world looks at the Establishment Clause. There's disagreement, right? There's absolutely disagreement. Just like on that speech, there's disagreement under the meaning of the Establishment Clause, all right? And so, I mean, it goes from a kind of a spectrum of government that can't make an official religion, right? That's sponsored by the government. That's the only religion we can have, which is kind of one view. And the other end of the spectrum, there has to be an absolute separation between religion and government, right? The public thing. So, and again, when you hear this, let's look at this. The accommodationist view. Government should bend a bit and allow a certain degree of church-state blending. For example, allow nativity scenes on city property. So that's, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the 3 kings on the city hall, right? Allowing a non-denominational prayer in school, right? What that means is, you pray to God rather than Buddha, Allah, Jesus, something specific, but a general kind of higher deity, right? All right. So that stresses the freedom of religion, right? To practice religion. All right. Now, and this is Establishment Clause, right? Now, when you say church and state, church is church, right? But then the deal is state is government, generally meaning schools, the federal government, state governments, county governments, that kind of thing. You can practice your own private religion outside of those places. Well, there are limits, which we'll get into in a minute, all right? Now, there's a separationist view of the Establishment Clause as well. Remember, these are all views of the Establishment Clause. The separationist view says there should be an absolute wall of separation, right? And this is from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote, which people will cite as what the framers thought that the Establishment Clause meant, all right? There should be an absolute kind of freedom from religion in your public life, meaning public again, right? Not necessarily in your home, but publicly, right? Working for government officials, police officers not being able to have, Jesus is my homeboy patch, or, government officials, all right? Okay, now, there's the wall of separation, there's the accommodationist view, now there's the endorsement view. It forbids government practices that endorse religion, all right? So anything that kind of favors a specific religion, they don't like. Now, the non-preferentialist view, is this idea that there can be some religion within government, but it can't be a specific religion that can't be in government, that can be, right? You can't favor just Christianity. You can't favor just Lutherans or Baptists or Mormons or Catholics, or whatever, but you can kind of generally have religion allowed in some support. You can support some religion in government, all right? Now, going back to that endorsement view just for a second, number 3 there, no nativity scene in the city hall or no 10 commandments posted in the courthouse, right? Well, let's wait for it. We'll get there, all right? Now, so there's your general kind of range of interpretations. Like how the question of the Establishment Clause is how much government should be allowed, how much religion should be allowed to exist within government, right? The state, all right? The state is this reference to government, not the state of Nevada although that's a government as well, right? Or state of California, but the state, the governments at various levels, all right? So now we also know, by the way, that the religious clause, establishment clause, was incorporated to the states, just like Gitlow incorporated speech, all right? So now, and that's Everson v. Board incorporated the establishment clause to the states, all right? Okay, now Everson v. Board, the key here is that there is a wall of separation in Everson v. Board, and that the establishment clause in the First Amendment applies to the states because of, now remember, which due process clause? Think about it for a second. Is it the 5th or the 14th that allows incorporation? Which one has state in it, right? Okay, you figure it out. All right, so now, other rulings. Zorak v. Clausen. There can be release time for students is constitutional, meaning if you say, look, you know, we're Jewish, we're Christian, we're Catholic, we're this, we're that, we practice, so I need Tuesday off because of religious reasons, that's been upheld in Zorak. Engel v. Vitale. Now, I think Zorak is, you don't need to know Zorak, all right? But Engel v. Vitale, number 3 in the key rulings here. No state-sponsored decided prayer in school, right? Like, we don't sit up here and pray together in school, right? All right. Now, the other thing, now the idea is here with that Engel v. Vitale, it's morphed over time. You guys now know that every day we have a moment of silence, and that's the compromise, right? The compromise is some of you can pray and some of you can sing a song in your head. Some of you can think about that math test. Some of you can dream about art history while you're sitting there in that moment of silence, right? But it gives that freedom to choose what you want. But what Engel v. Vitale said is no prayer in school. We're not going to stand up every day before Mr. Barry's first period and say a prayer together, right? They said that violates, think about it, the establishment clause, all right? Now we have Abington v. Schempp that says no devotional Bible reading in school, right? And you guys will know from art history that we look at a ton of Christian stuff. But the idea is we're not looking at it from a devotional standpoint. We're looking at it from a historical or educational standpoint to figure out moments in time, right? Abington v. Schempp. Now, Epperson v. Arkansas, which is really interesting. State laws cannot prohibit the teaching of evolution. Evolution, right? It was a scientific perspective of human development, right? And there were state laws in conservative places like Arkansas that wanted to ban the teaching of evolution, right? We're all famous, you know, we all know the famous Scopes monkey trial, right? So the idea here is states cannot do that. Now recently, you know, we've seen the new trend towards this is some conservative states have said, okay, instead of not teaching evolution, we want to teach creationism side by side with it. And what the courts have generally said is no, because that's favoring a specific religion or religious view. All right? Okay, remember, we're looking at the establishment clause. Now, here we get to the pièce de résistance, the key thing here, Lemon v. Kurtzman. Lemon v. Kurtzman establishes a precedent, which is the Lemon test. And the Lemon test is a test for the courts to look at a law, to look at an action, to look at anything done, a practice, whatever, and see if it violates the establishment clause. All right, now I think what the Supreme Court justices, what lawyers, what people will tell you is it's not a perfect test, but it's a test to determine it, right? So here's the deal, 3 prongs, all right? And you got to know the 3 prongs, all right? Does the statute, law, or action have a religious purpose alone? If the law's purpose is purely religious, it violates the Establishment Clause. Does it advance, promote, or inhibit, restrain a specific religion? If it does that, it violates the Lemon Test, violates the Establishment Clause. Does the law, practice, statute, whatever, create an excessive entanglement with government? If it does, it violates the Establishment Clause. Now, the problem with that is quite often there's some disagreement about what excessive entanglement means, right? Okay. Then finally, all right, we get into Zelman v. Harris, which basically said public money, meaning government money, can be used to send disadvantaged students to religious schools, right? So, because they're not going there purely just for religion, they're going there to get a better education, right? So it's not purely religious, doesn't violate the Lemon Test, all right? Lemon Test. All right, now, let's check it out. So that's the Establishment Clause, all right? Now we have the Free Exercise Clause, which they're both, right? Exercise and establishment are both in the First Amendment, just like speech, press, assembly, petition government for a redress of your grievances is in the Establishment Clause, or in the First Amendment, all right? So, free exercise protects the right to worship, all right? Now, we again know that there's a court case that has incorporated the free exercise clause to the states, all right? Just like Gitlow did with speech. Now, here's the deal. And don't worry about that contradiction between establishment and free exercise at the moment. Look at D in page 8 here, right? There's a distinction between belief and practice, just like thought and action. Speech is somewhere in between, right? So belief is always allowed, but practice is not always allowed. We have to apply the balancing test to this again, right? Freedom of worship is relative, not an absolute right. So the balancing test applies to it. You can't just practice whatever you want, all right? But you can think whatever you want. All right, now, there's some, again, standards or tests that used to be applied that are applied to free exercise clause cases, right? So here's the old standard, all right? Look at this. Government could not deny religious exercise or expression unless there was a compelling purpose to do so. Therefore, the government or the state had to say, we have a really, 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 really important, that's what compelling means, purpose, to limit this religious exercise. Therefore, it was difficult for a state to come up with a compelling purpose. If they had a compelling purpose, the courts generally said, okay, we'll let you restrict that religious activity. But if they didn't have a compelling purpose, or if the courts didn't think they had a compelling purpose, they couldn't restrict that religious activity. Now, then we go all the way to 1990. That was generally the case for the precedent for a long time. We get to a case called Oregon v. Smith, right? Now, what happened was there was a guy that was working for the state of Oregon who got fired for failing a drug test. He failed that drug test because he used peyote. The reason he used peyote, this drug, was because he was a Native American, and that peyote drug was part of a Native American religious exercise. It was part of a ritual. All right, it is an established ritual. It wasn't like he's just like using drugs and saying, "Oh, it's my religion." Right? This was a precedent. Like, there was a lot of documentation of this being a religious activity. But when he failed the drug test, he got fired. All right, and so he said, "No, you can't fire me because that's part of my free exercise clause rights." Right, the First Amendment free exercise clause rights. And what the court said is that the state could, in fact, limit that religion, limit that activity. And so all that did, and you just got to wrap your brain around this, is all that did is it made it easier. Like, it changed the old precedent of them having to have a compelling purpose, which they simply made it easier for them to strike down religious activities, states, all right? So, it used to be a compelling purpose. After Oregon v. Smith, they got rid of the compelling purpose, and it made it easier for states to limit the exercise of religion. Now, once that court case happened, there was a legislative or statutory response by the Congress. Right? They wrote the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which in legislation, it basically said there has to be a compelling purpose. They're challenging Oregon v. Smith's precedent, right? By writing this law. There has to be a compelling purpose why the state is limiting that religious exercise, that activity, all right? Now, so that legislation made it difficult for states to limit religious activity. So, of course, we get a court case because the city of Bourne denied Mr. Flores what he believed to be his free exercise to practice religion. And so what happened is they sued, right? And that got to court. And basically what it did was it said, no, Mr. Flores' rights were not violated. And therefore it struck down the precedent, or it struck down the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. I'm sorry, I'm messing that up a little bit. The city of Bourne v. Flores struck down the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act made it difficult for states to restrain religion, right? Because they were challenging the precedent set in Oregon v. Smith, which made it easier for states to practice religion. So, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which its intention was to make it hard to limit free exercise of religion, was struck down in City of Bourne v. Flores, thus restoring the precedent established in Oregon v. Smith and making it easier for the states to limit free exercise of religion. right? They don't have to have a compelling purpose, a really, really good reason. They just have to have a good reason, all right? Less of a burden on the state, more of a burden on the religion. So now, check this out. There's some of these things that have been upheld and some of these things have been restricted. So, things that have been restricted under the free exercise. Reynolds v. U.S. said no polygamy, right? He claimed that that was a religious belief. They said, sorry. U.S. v. Lee said the Amish couldn't use religion as a reason to not pay taxes, Social Security taxes. And then, of course, Oregon v. Smith said you can't use peyote as part of your religious exercise and still work for the state of Oregon. All right? Okay. I think in Oregon v. Smith they were drug counselors, by the way. All right? I have to double check on that. All right. Now, look at some things that have been allowed, right? Jehovah's Witness cases. Kids don't have to stand up to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag every day if it violates their religious beliefs, right? Jehovah's Witness believes that that's essentially like worshiping a false god, all right? So they've upheld it. Wisconsin v. Yoder. Amish kids don't have to go to school past the 8th grade because they believe in their religious exercise. They don't need to do that. They're going to work on other things, all right? And then we have the city of Halai here. So the city of Halai said, right, no ritual animal sacrifice, right? We had Santerians, right? That Sublime song, I don't practice Santeria, right? Santeria is kind of, I mean, I may mess this up, so I'm sorry if I'm offending a Santerian, but the idea is that you can use, it's a form of kind of voodoo or Caribbean a religion in which, you know, animal sacrifice is part of the religious exercise. And so the city had said, no. I think they said something like, you can't sacrifice animals, it's a hazard, you know, like a health problem, right? And so what the Supreme Court did in that case, right, is say that city law, that city ordinance banning animal sacrifice is no good. No, all right? Now, finally, Article 6 in the Constitution. Let Eve jump from a sunroof. In addition to supremacy clause, which, you know, there's Article 6 which says, nobody that holds a public office, a government job, from the president to chief justices to the city mayor, has to take a religious test or oath. That goes straight back to old school England, old school Europe, where you could only be a member of the church, the Anglican church, the Catholic church, where there were specific special religions, right? Like that's like kind of the way I'm going to end it. This idea that the free exercise clause and the establishment clause were put in the Constitution because the framers knew that we would fight over religion, right? They'd watched after the Protestant Reformation, you know, Europe rip itself apart and murder each other in the name of religious exercise, right? And so what they thought is they could separate church and state, they could protect certain kinds of religion or all religious exercise. We would get rid of that political, theological problem, wouldn't kill each other over religion, right? Or at least limit that stuff. All right. Hey, good job. Hey, one more thing about all that speech stuff, right? Maybe because there's not so much here tonight, go back and look at the right to petition government for a redress of grievances, right? Just check it out a little bit, all right? And then remember also the Skokie case and the right to assemble. We looked at Skokie in that speech exercise today. The idea is the right to assemble, and you know that Skokie case was also speech. We had neo-Nazis that wanted to march downtown in Skokie, Illinois, where you had a ton of Holocaust survivors living at the time. And they wanted to march right down there as a right of free speech, the right to assemble. All right? And remember this, the Supreme Court upheld that right for them to march down that town. Even though it was offensive, even though it was vulgar, even though there was the potential for violence towards the Nazis, they upheld that right. All right? One of the big things you're going to have to try to understand is quite often the speech that we're protecting in the court cases is not speech that a lot of us generally love. All right? But the idea is maybe one day the speech that you believe is important is going to not be viewed as good by the public or the masses or the majority, and they can limit your speech. And so we're limiting this, or we're upholding or protecting some of this really offensive speech in the name of saying, you know, that free speech is important in the United States and we should hear all ideas, however vulgar they end up being, right? Or wrong, or, you know, politically insensitive, and that kind of thing, all right? Okay, so, hey, I'm going to put a ton of extra credit on this quiz based on the first day, all right? Okay, bye.